You're listening to another ambitious entrepreneurnetwork.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
Welcome to the Christian Entrepreneurs Podcast, daily conversations with Christian entrepreneurs to inspire and empower Christian business owners to walk strongly in their faith, while build a thriving business that honors Him in every way. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of the Christian Entrepreneurs Podcast. This is episode 24, and I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross, brand and communication strategist, also known as the podcasting queen. Today, we're going to be talking all about money, money, money. Now, for some of you, notice the triggers that came up. Joining me on today's show is Carolyn Moes. She is a mum of 3 adult children and an Oma to 2 beautiful grandchildren. And this year, Carolyn and her husband celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Congratulations, Carolyn. Now, Carolyn has always had a passion and a desire to help people overcome obstacles in her life or in their lives. She grew up with a father who gambled and hence became a saver, and she was always frugal with her money. And they struggled through the 1980s on one wage, with her husband away from home for 12 hours a day. Now, interest rates, if you can remember back, was around 18.5%. And she would often worry about where the next meal would come from. Stress and anxiety were common feelings that affected their family life. Now, she was introduced to a system of money management in 2004, which revolutionized her life. And now she works as a spending planner and has the privilege of helping others to be set free from money stress and conflict, and so that they can work towards their goals and their dreams. And it is her dream to change the world one family at a time. Now, specifically on today's show, Carolyn's going to share that life is a journey, and everything we learn along the way shapes us to be the person that God wants us to be. Understanding that God has a purpose and a plan for all of us, and finding out what that purpose is paramount to having a fulfilling life, as well as we must forgive and stop using our past as an excuse to stop us moving towards our future and all that God has planned for us. So welcome to the show, Carolyn.
Thank you. Very exciting to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something, a topic of money brings up a lot of different triggers and emotions for people, and not often something that is spoken about, because we want to keep that hidden. But I think it's so important to be transparent in that, because, and you'll be sharing in a moment with the work that you do, because once we understand certain things, we can change the beliefs and habits that we have around money and start to really see wealth increase and things like that. But not if we remain stuck around that. Just take us back to where you were as a child, because I believe that many of us, we create our beliefs around money depending on what we observe, what we hear as a child growing up. And for you, as you said, your father was a gambler. So I'd imagine that there was a lot of stress going around is relating to money in your family too, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was the youngest of 4 children growing up, and I was the only girl. And so I remember frequent arguments and fighting, and generally it was like I wouldn't have known at the time, I guess, because I was quite small, but I do remember there was a lot of conflict in the home. And as I grew up, I realised that a lot of that stemmed around money. You know, my mother was, you've got to think back, I mean, I was born in 1957, so we're going back a long time, and going through the 1960s and 70s, where women didn't really work. They were at home raising a family. My mother had to go out and work to support the family, because my father would often lose money on the horses or whatever. So my mum worked in many different jobs. She did waitressing. She did all sorts of, she cleaned people's houses. She did fairly menial things, but she did that to support her family and to feed her children. So yeah, stress was very, very real.
Yes. And then, of course, what you were saying, then as a child, I'd imagine you were thinking to yourself, well, I'm never going to be in that situation. That often happens, doesn't it? Sometimes
Absolutely.
we can either go the absolute opposite, or sometimes we can repeat the pattern. One thing I do want to stress in the show is that if, there is something that does trigger you, we'll definitely share Carolyn's details on how you can get in contact with her, because this is certainly an area that she helps in. One thing when we're talking about the gambling is we're going to talk about, the whole principle of the root of evil is a love of money. But when we're thinking about gambling, it's completely different, isn't it? It's not a love of money. There's that addiction there. It's two separate things, isn't it? Yes?
Yeah. Absolutely. When you're talking about that verse, and it's a lot of people look at that verse in the wrong way, because it says, the love of money is the root of all evil, and we are meant to be affluent and influential. God says, He will provide us over and above what we can ask or imagine. And so I believe that we are blessed to be a blessing, and when God blesses us with money, we can then bless others with that money.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know that sometimes what happens when you talk to people who have big debt, or they have that addiction to gambling, there's an incredible amount of shame that is surrounded with that. But there is just something that triggers them to do that action. And this is this huge ongoing cycle. So, and then sometimes it's recognizing and because one of the things that you talk about, forgiveness, which is really important, because as an adult, or as a young adult, and then as an adult, you could have continued to blame your father for his behavior and so forth, but recognizing that there were issues around what was happening for him, and he was doing the best that he could with the resources that he had available. Unfortunately, those resources weren't supporting him to realize, okay, how can we handle this, so that we don't then take on certain similar behaviors and see that repeated. I think that's really important for us to get on the onset, that there is this blame and shame, and that we're not blaming and shaming things that happened in the past. But let's start off with life as a journey, because I'm sure in your past you've had a lot of experiences, and I think before we pressed record you said a lot of experiences now and learnings that you now share with your clients. It really shapes us the way that God wants us to be as the people that we're becoming. Share a little bit more about that.
Okay, so I can look back, and I guess hindsight is a wonderful thing, and the older I get, I look back on so many times of my life where God gave me opportunities to be a blessing to others, even in small ways. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we, going through the 1980s for us was a massive struggle, and I remember so many times when I'd look in the pantry, there was no food in the pantry to eat, and I'd think, okay, well, God, I don't know where the next meal's coming from. I can't do this. This is too hard. We have no money. My husband was out of the house for 12 hours a day. I had 3 little kids, and I would just pray. Some days I would just sit on the floor and pray and go, God, you need to help me. Where are you? And do you know the number of times that I'd get a knock on the door and someone would be standing there with a meal and go, oh, God told me this morning that I was to provide your dinner for you tonight. And I go, why do we ever doubt? Why do we ever doubt? And I look back now, and I listen to my clients, because I work with a lot of young married couples with kids and they're really struggling at the moment. Yeah. And I just look at it and you go, you know what? I understand how hard it is for you, mm-hmm. but it's like the saying that, this too shall pass, and this is just a stage. When your kids are little, when they're babies, you can't wait until they walk, and when they're walking, you can't wait until they're out of nappies, and once they're out of nappies, you can't wait until they go to school, and once they go to school, you can't wait, and so everything is a journey, and we learn, and God will teach us and train us and take us through hard times, mm-hmm. so that we can get to the other end and go, okay, now I understand. The reason I guess growing up in that sort of a house with that sort of conflict, I did, when I got my first job, I saved everything. I wouldn't spend my money, right? But the one thing I did do was I actually booked a cruise. So my first job was in 1976, I think. And I booked a cruise for 12 months ahead. I was earning my first wage. I earned $38 a week. And the cruise was $1,200. It was 3 weeks around the islands in New Zealand. So that's a pretty expensive cruise back then. And so I knew how much I had worked out. Back then I used an envelope system, and I don't know, a lot of people will remember the old envelope system where you would get your pay in a little orange envelope and you'd get your cash out, and then I'd put, $5 here for mum for board, and then I'd put, so much here. And I saved up for my cruise in that 12 months and paid cash for that. Back then we didn't have credit cards. We didn't go into debt. If we wanted it, we saved up for it, and then we bought it. And that really held me in good stead for how I've handled money my whole life, pretty much.
It's interesting because I grew up in a family who were very frugal too, but they'd grown up in the war, as young adults, and then even married life. And I remember my mum and dad, and they were from Holland too, and I know that you're Dutch, being an Oma, or your husband. They had tea as part of their wedding party, and for that was just a huge blessing to have a cup of tea on the wedding. That's how bad things were in the Second World War. So their frugality and being very careful about what they spent. I remember as a young child, a lot of my friends would get new dresses and things like that. So, I wanted a new dress too. But what I did, because we create beliefs which are just untrue, of course, I kind of created the belief, if you will, that my parents didn't love me because they wouldn't buy me a new dress. So when I started working, I did the exact opposite. I rebelled. And that's what we can do sometimes, can't we? We rebel. Yeah. So I pretty much spent and you're probably thinking, oh no, being someone who saved a lot, I spent, if I wanted a new dress, I'd get a new dress and jewelry and things like that. But thankfully, I've been able to realize, because once you take a step back and you realize, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Why am I spending this money? And it wasn't the thing. It was because I felt good. I felt loved, and I had this new dress and that kind of thing. So it's good to recognize, right, what's fueling this? And of course, we know that we can take it to prayer, and we can certainly be helped that way. I absolutely understand what you're saying, and that brings us segues beautifully into the next point. I mean, understanding that God has a purpose and plan for all of us, and to think, not that we want you to go through all of those experiences, but everything that you have gone through, the challenges and the struggles and the problems, developed in you a strength that now you can impart to people that you work with. It's done that whole full circle, and often that happens, doesn't it? The challenges that we go through, if we lean in and we allow him to strengthen us through that, we really can be a blessing in other people's lives. Yes, speak more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I often say to people now, be careful what you pray for, because if you pray for patience, God will give you trials. And we'll be, oh God, just give me patience.
Come on, just please.
That's right. So be careful what you pray for. But it's I think what I've learned over the years is that if we can lean into those hard times, and I know how difficult that is, it's really hard to be going through a really tough time and go, sometimes you feel a bit like Job, when everything is taken away. And I can even look back as close as 7 years ago. In 2009, we lost pretty much everything we owned in the GFC. And within the space of 4 years, we lost our home and investment property. We lost money. We lost both of my parents in that time. I lost my job. I lost my health. So it was just in 4 years, it was just like, okay, God, what else have you got? Like, seriously, and I literally felt like Job. And I took 12 months. We were living in a 1-bedroom flat underneath the house of a very dear friend of ours. And I just took 12 months just to sit. And the one verse that God gave me in that time was, be still and know that I am God. You know, and that's all I clung to. Be still and know that I am God. And everything, I've got you, I'm holding you. Everything that's happening is happening for a reason. I've got a plan and a purpose for your life, you know. And so, and sometimes you just have to sit back, take a breath and go, okay.
Yes, yes.
You know?
That's such a great reminder, because often in the chaos, often in the struggles, and I just heard this in my morning devotion, it's around needing to take that step back, because in the midst of our problems, when we are reminded of his presence, that's when we can be reminded of his promise. Lisa Turkhurst, I don't know if you've heard Proverbs 31, .org. They've got first 5. And Lisa, it was actually on the day before, and I don't think they have it on a Sunday, so I re-listened to it, and I thought that's so important. When we, in the midst of whatever problem we have, be still and remind us that God is around us all the time, his presence, then we can be reminded of his promise, which is that this too will pass, and the glorious promises that he has. When you're then considering that someone may be in a similar situation, and you know, when we're thinking in businesses, sometimes we can make decisions that we realize in hindsight. Hindsight is an incredible teacher, but sometimes did we really have to go through that to learn the lesson? Can we kind of learn that, you know, through something else, that we don't have to experience it? But if you're thinking that someone is in a situation where they are really struggling with money, what would be some of the things that you would like to remind them of? Maybe, you know, yes, being still, but are there some practical things that you can impart to really help them start to take the steps in the right direction?
No. I guess in my role as a spending planner, I mean, what I provide for people is basically, from a practical point of view, I provide them with a really great software program and 6 months of education and training. And during that time, we talk a lot about mindset, and we talk about, you know, where those values come from, where your money values, and we talked about that earlier. You know, so much of what we believe now and our beliefs around money come from our childhood and from our growing up years, you know. And so we really look at that and pull that apart and go, well, what do you think about money? How do you react in certain situations? You know, what do you really want for yourself and your family? You know, what are your goals and dreams? And so we do a lot of goal setting, a lot of mindset stuff with our clients as well. Yes. And look, I just walk the walk with them. And I share with them, you know, where I've been and how I've overcome those things, and help them to realize that they too can overcome that. This might be a really hard time for them at the moment, but we actually work together. And when you've got someone walking the walk with you, it's so much easier, isn't it? You know, it's like we're not put on earth to be alone, you know. God says, you know, I want a relationship with you, but I want you to have a relationship with each other. You know, we are here, we're just, and I don't know, I just have this incredible desire to connect to people and with people, and just, you know, I bring them in. I'm actually part of the Spending Planners Institute, which is like the body that there's lots of spending planners all in every state of Australia. And our mission is to change the world one family at a time. But what we always say is, you know, that we're part of a bigger picture, and we're part of a family of people who want to draw other people in and show them that there's a better way. There's a way out of debt, and there's a way out of stress and conflict in the home. And, you know, we often say that, you know, we're almost marriage savers. We have a saying that says, you know, when debt comes in the door, love goes out the window.
It's so
right?
true. It is
Yeah.
so true. I want to just back up there, because in your response, I think there's some golden nuggets, and sometimes we can just glean over those without really recognizing the power in those words. So there's a number of key steps, and we said there's practical steps, but there's also a really clear indication we need to be aware of our mindset. And I think often what we don't realize, when here we're talking about money, which as business owners, we do need to generate money. Money is not evil. I mean, obviously, if it consumes our every thought, well, then that's a little bit different. But, when we think that we create very sustainable businesses with a strong income, that means we can hire more people, which means we can bless them through employment. We can give to fund various incredible organizations that are doing great works around the world in developing countries. Now, we cannot give to that if we're not generating an income in our business that can allow that. So let's just get that off the table. Money's not evil. It's what you do with it and your attitude towards that. And if you want to do good, then that's great. But getting back to the attitude, and then realizing, what's my approach when it does come to money? Is there a belief, or is there something that's happening that's actually blocking money? Or once I have money, it's going through my fingers because of some belief that continues to replay. Once there's an awareness, there's some practical steps in place, which you say that you work through with clients. So we realize then, as business owners, okay, it's not just a quick fix. But once you have the right steps, you have the right mindset, both of those and the right support, of course, all of those together can help you move forward. I think that's so important in any business and life in general. Often it's because we don't have a plan. I mean, who has a goal? Do you have, as a couple, what goals do you have as far as income and money is concerned? And often, you said this, there's different personalities and beliefs that often happen too in a couple, but also maybe if you're in partnership with someone in your business. And often this is not discussed, is it? And it can be the biggest thing, how we handle money and approach and our attitude to money, that can unfortunately break relationships and see a breakdown in relationships, yes?
And do you know what the other thing that just came to my mind then as you were speaking was, as business owners and see, a lot of us are single business owners, so we're still growing our business, we're still very young in our business. And, I think the one thing that I really struggled with right at the beginning of my business was undervaluing myself.
Yes.
It was literally, can I really charge people that much money to help them with their finance? I mean, am I really that good? And you start to doubt yourself.
Yes.
And so and it took me quite a while to overcome that, because I thought, well, and see, because I love to give and I love to serve and I love to be a blessing to others, I wanted to do it for free. Oh, look, I know you can't afford me. I know you're in a whole heap of debt, but, look, I'll just do it for free, and I had to get over that because I'm a business owner. And as you say, as a business owner, you want to earn money so that you can then bless other people, and you can, look at the bigger global picture of, how can you bless, how can you fund other things that you want to fund and want to be a part of as well? Because there's so much happening in the world that I just want to get in there and go, oh my goodness, I have to help these people, and I have to do this. So I want to generate income in my business. And, so I guess, putting value on yourself and what you have to offer to people as a business owner, and not be afraid to earn money and to bring money into the business, because then you have that opportunity to give back.
Yes, that's right. Someone, I can't remember where I read this, but they were talking about that inability to accept money. Now, can you imagine, as Christian business owners, we realize that we've been given gifts and talents. We've been blessed with that. Now, imagine if we're saying no all the time. It's almost as if we're not valuing the gifts that we've been given.
Yeah.
And when we look at it that way, it's like, we don't want to do that at all, because we realize just how incredible that is. And so, and it's being mindful about the beliefs that, and just what runs through our head. Like if we see someone go past with a nice car or whatever it is, if we do, what do we think? Oh, the filthy rich or something like that. That is a belief then that needs to be looked at, because you don't know what he or she has done. They might be funding. One of my mentors is an 8-figure business owner in the US, but her whole goal, and I think she works it now, she gives 90% away and keeps 10. and the incredible wealth that she has. And going back to your story about Job, we know that he lost everything, but because he remained true and faithful and didn't stray from the word, God doubly blessed him.
Yeah,
and when you look at his life, you think, like all of the turmoil you went through, Carolyn, those are all things that you can say, you know what, I'm not liking this game, I'm leaving,
Well, I mean, I told you the story of the GFC and 7 years ago. I mean, that was in 2009. We now have a beautiful home overlooking Moreton Bay in Brisbane, and we couldn't have done that without, my knowledge of money and being able to bring money into the family as well. So God, yes, he can take everything away, but then he can doubly bless you. Plus I was blessed with grandchildren and all sorts of wonderful things.
That's right.
So, I mean, so,
But isn't it amazing that you can enjoy all of this, Carolyn, and you can really fulfill your purpose and blessing others in that, and be blessed financially without feeling guilty and like, because and we don't need to feel guilty to be able to earn and charge for the services that we are offering. Let's move on and talk about forgiveness. I think this is a huge one, because as we know, if we are harboring any ill will, that negative energy is going to keep us stuck. So talk about, we must forgive and stop using our past as an excuse, because that is going to stop us from moving forward into the future that God has already designed and prepared for us.
Yeah. And, I guess for me, I mean, I turned 60 last year, which is, quite a shock to the system when you become a senior. And,
60 is the new 50.
I know. Actually, I was thinking it was the new 45.
There you go. Let's just say that right now.
Absolutely. I have a 35-year-old daughter. I keep saying I don't know how she got that old, because I'm not that old, so. I guess for me, it took me a long time to get to this point, to do my journey and to understand what my purpose and what my role was, in this life. And I mean, God was preparing me along the way for all of that, but you don't know that.
Sometimes don't you wish that he would give you a little peek into the playbook?
I should say, I just want a letter from God saying, Carolyn, this is your purpose in life. It would have been so much easier. But I guess what I learned along the way was, number one, absolutely forgiveness. I mean, remember, I didn't grow up in a happy household, so there was a lot of stuff there, and a lot of mindset stuff for me that I had to work through and change. And then you go into a relationship and you marry someone with a totally different mindset. They've come from a totally different background, so they don't really understand you don't really understand them. So those first few years of marriage are so tumultuous, because you're trying to understand each other and trying to understand how your past has shaped you and my past has shaped me. And then you bring children into the mix, and then all of a sudden you've got a whole new gamut of, whatever. So it's, forgiveness for me took a long time. And I guess what I would say to people now is, it's probably one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but one of the most important things that you will ever do is to let go, let God, move forward, know that God's got a better plan, that he's in there, in the heartache and the hardship and all of that. But he, it's like that verse that says, God works all things together for his good, and as much as that's really hard for us to believe, it's true. And I can see that in my life, and I try and share that with other people, that it's just, you need to allow. And I look at the story of Corrie ten Boom. And Corrie ten Boom was well into her 70s, I think close to 80, and she was confronted with the person who had tortured her in the prison camps, right? And she said, at that moment, I had a choice. She said, I could hold on to my anger and hurt and bitterness and resentment, or she said, I could look him in the eye and say, I forgive you. And she said that for her was the most powerful moment of her life. I had to get to a point in my life where I could say to my father, I forgive you. because, he shaped me, but I chose to take a different road. And that's where, you look back and you go, that's who I was. And that was a part of who I could have become, but you choose to be someone different, and that's where mindset is just so important. I listen to a lot of, seriously, every morning, my daily routine is, coffee at 7, mindset, whether it's, I'll read my Bible, have a prayer time, I'll listen to a positive influencer, and so you start the day. If I could show you, I could turn my computer around and actually show you my study wall, which is just amazing. And it's full of just, my daughter who's a minimalist says, Mum, it's way too busy. But I absolutely love it. And it's, and I have one saying that I look at every morning, and it just simply says, I can and I will.
Yes. Yeah.
Important.
So important. And it says in the Bible, we need to renew our mind every single morning. And as we know, as Christians, we have an enemy who, if he can cause doubt, fear, anxiousness, worry, and get in there and use our different personalities and beliefs around money to cause conflict, then that's what he wants. And I think it's such a great reminder for us. And I think we need to have an appreciation of, particularly if we're looking at spouses, because, for many of us who are solopreneurs in our own business, we do have a spouse, and they may have a very different way of managing money. I know my husband and I are actually opposites. He's quite frugal. And then when he understands something, he goes in like a maverick. Whereas I tended to like to spend first, and then, my risk factor is a little bit of it. I mean, I grew up in that whole frugality, so I understand it. But understanding, I think, and having an appreciation, then you can come together in a way that, in the goals that you set, in the different, there's an understanding there, I think, and there's no blame, there's no shame, all of that around there, and you can work together to achieve the outcome that you want. Carolyn, we can talk about this for a whole day. It's such a fascinating topic. I think money and time too, because we can have a scarcity mindset around money. There's never enough money, there's too much competition going around, which, by the way, is absolute rubbish. There is so much out there, and wealth, and incredible abundance and prosperity, especially as Christians. As you said, we've been promised, seek first the kingdom of God. Granted to you, but around money too. And it's interesting, it just sometimes you just need to observe and listen. What am I saying? There's never enough time to do everything that you need to do, there's a scarcity around time too. Money and time is a great magnifying glasses into what's going on in your life. So we have just scratched the surface, and I know for many of you who are listening and watching today, there's certainly some great aha moments that you have had. For people who want to find out more, Carolyn, about the work that you do and how you can support them, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yep. So I am on Facebook. So if you just go Carolyn Moes Certified Spending Planner on Facebook.
Yes.
And I do also have a website, carolynmoescsp.com.au. If you just Google Carolyn Moes, most of those things will come up as well. Yes. And and I think you can put my mobile number underneath here for people to contact me, my mobile as well. Facebook is probably, there are 17 billion people on Facebook or whatever, so I'm pretty easy to find on there as well.
That's wonderful. I have to say, I love the way that you have, through the institution and so forth, called yourself spending planners, because sometimes what people do is they use the word budget. And people who tend to like to spend a little bit more, the word budget just makes me want to go although I am getting better.
No, we say budgets are a dirty word. Okay. So, and the thing, just really quickly, the difference between a spending plan and a budget is the budget is 2-dimensional, a spending plan is 3-dimensional. So if I said to you that on any given day of 365 days of the year, I could tell you how much money should be in your bank account so that all your bills are paid and you're not using a credit card, then that's a spending plan. Okay, so budget very in.
It seems too restrictive. It's almost like, you know, what am I depleting myself of so that I can't have? But spending plan, it just sounds far more
everyone loves to
empowering.
spend money.
That's
you just
right.
need,
It's like, let's
you
get
need
it.
to know how to spend it wisely.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
And whether you're in business or whether you're personal, you know, having a good plan in place means that you can, you know, so as a business we can bring more money in, so we can
yes, cash flow is important. If we're not managing our cash, and it's interesting. It's actually quite sad, Carolyn. You probably know this too. That when it comes to women in business, a lot of women tend not to really want to be interested in that, and therefore, you know, they're not empowered to know what their figures are telling them. A lot of them are not putting away money for superannuation and so forth. And you know, it's just information. Once you learn a little bit more and have your bookkeeper and other people who are supporting you in your business be able to explain it, then you realize, oh, it's not that confusing at all. These are the numbers that I really need to track and monitor. You feel far more empowered. And then at the end of each month, quarter and so forth, then there's finances there to be able to pay the dues and things like that too. But not unless you're monitoring and tracking. It's like anything, isn't it, in business?
That's right.
Unless you monitor and track and plan and have all of the right things in place, then unfortunately, you're going blind. So yes, we'll put all of the ways that to contact Carolyn on the show notes. Did you want to say one last parting insights?
Oh, look, just education and training is paramount in anything, whether we're in business, whether we're personal. You know, the more we educate ourselves, and mindset, you know, just read and study. And I mean, I often say to people, you know, if you're not learning, then you're not living.
Yes.
Okay. So it's you know, and I have another saying on my wall that I'll just finish with, and it says, "It is what it is, but it will be what you make it."
Yes, I like that too. I love that. So all of contact details would be on our show notes, ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/TCE24, ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/TCE24. And for those of you listening to the audio podcast, we actually recorded this as well. So pop across to the show notes and you'll be able to see Carolyn. We've also done here at the network is made it very easy for you to subscribe to this show, as well as another couple of shows that we do. So ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/subscribe. And then that means that you can get access to all of the new shows, which we are publishing on a daily basis. So come on and subscribe. One of the things that I'm doing for all of our guests, Carolyn, and I'd love to do that for you as well, is just close with a word of prayer.
Lovely. Thank you.
Dear Father, thank you that we could spend some time today speaking with Carolyn and having her share her insights, her knowledge and her wisdom around the topic of money. Father, as we said today, so many of the beliefs and the values and of course our habits come from when we were children and what we observed and what we heard growing up. And sometimes, you know, what we heard and observed was not really empowering, and therefore we can really see as adults and even younger adults that repeating in our life. But Father, thank you that we know through your promise and through your presence that can be changed, and especially too working with people such as Carolyn, who can really help us to get a better mindset and to really break free from some of those patterns that continue to just work and play out in our lives. And Father, when we're talking about money, sometimes there can be some incredible shame around that, but we know through your promise that when we bring that to your throne and we ask for forgiveness, that shame and guilt is left. We can leave that with you. We no longer need to do that. So, Lord, we pray for the people who are listening and watching today that maybe they are struggling and they can see that this is something that they need to handle, to bring in prayer, to get support around, so that they can move forward and start to really appreciate and live out the purpose and the plan that you have for their life, which, as Carolyn said so beautifully, every single one of us has a purpose and a plan destined through what you want for us. So we just pray for them that they will reach out and get support and that they'll really feel your nearness and closeness. And we continue to ask for your blessing on Carolyn's business and her clients that she works with, that they can get a much more empowered mindset, get some key principles in place to help them have an incredible savings plan, that they can continue to grow kingdom-focused businesses and contribute to amazing projects around the world, helping fund and developing countries and other projects that really follow a faith-based principle too. We ask this in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much again, Carolyn. This is a topic I think that is not often spoken about. So thank you for stepping up and speaking about and the transparency. I loved our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Marie. It's lovely being here.
You've been listening to the Christian Entrepreneurs Podcast, brought to you by BeTheDifferenceMovement.com. Changing the world one message at a time. Do you feel called to influence real change with your message? Join our supportive community of like-minded influencers, thought leaders, and disruptors at www.BeTheDifferenceMovement.com. That's BeTheDifferenceMovement.com.